Okay, just make sure that we are recording. So recording in 3, 2, 1. Okay. I think we were into sensing. Okay, and thought I'd read a passage from here where Osensei talks a little bit about World War II, and then we might get a couple of things from what sensing might mean. Okay. Okay, so this is again The Heart of Aikido, translated by John Stephen Sensei, and it has a title in Japanese, which is Takemusu Aiki. It's a series of lectures that the sensei gave not in an Aikido dojo, but actually at Goi Sensei's group, which was more of a spiritual community. During the war, the fighting became more and more fierce. And I saw that defeat was inevitable. The gods told me the world is in terrible trouble. One after the other, young men are being sent to be slaughtered. This dreadful state of affairs has come about because of the inability of nations to rid themselves of hate and contention. It is up to you to give your all in order to stop this war. Okay. And a lot of times, the gods told me this or that. One way of kind of looking at it is there's a sensing going on, whether or not you sort of get the words or the sense of what is being said, okay, by the universe, the finer forces of the universe. Okay, we'll go over this again. Some of you came in late, which is fine. Okay, but we're going to continue here, and we'll recap this after we do the movement. This was inspiration I had, and I hoped that I would be able to accomplish such a great task. If you're given a mission by the gods, I'm not sure that you hear the words. It is more something that wells up inside you, something that you sense, okay? I had the intuition that Hiroshima would soon be destroyed and the war would end. But given the circumstances, I had to keep my mission hidden. I think at that point, it would have been very, very difficult for him to come out against the war, okay? And again, he had the intuition, the sense that Hiroshima was going to be destroyed. Was that something that he knew? It wasn't kind of that he, picked up some timeline, he had some sort of a screen that explained the news feed from, the future. It was more, I think, something that welled up inside him. What I could do was establish a Takemusu Aiki dojo dedicated to peace and acting as a beacon to the world. So the voices, the sense he had stopped the war. Well, that was something that would have been difficult, even though it was, in some sense, a direct order. But he could build a Takemusu Aiki dojo that stood for a lot of the things that really the world was supposed to in its more perfect sense, you see. Okay. And sure enough, the war did end. So I had a sense. Not long after, I had another mystical experience. I was standing in my garden at 2 a.m. A phantom image of myself appeared and engaged me in swordplay. At first, I could not counter the phantom's move, but then I began to anticipate his cuts and thrusts and control him. When that happened, the image disappeared in a flash. This went on for 3 days. And so he's saying, not only was there a phantom spirit image that he was fencing with, okay, and it was an image of himself. Initially, he couldn't do anything with it. But after a while, he began to sense the phantom's movements. And so in a way, I mean, the two are somewhat related. They're if we were watching them, would we see the phantom image? We might see something like maybe a field of light or something, but I'm not sure that we would have said, oh, that's a phantom image and that's him in that phantom image. But in some sense, a more advanced level of himself shows. And initially, he can't do much with it, but as he becomes more equal to it, he starts to sense what that image is going to do, which is probably the purpose of the image. And so both of those things, one's more of a mystical experience related around martial arts, and the other is more like being told he was supposed to stop the war. Okay. And both of them would seem to indicate that he had the ability not just to muddle along with his concrete, ordinary senses, but that there were other avenues, other dimensions of himself that he had, or that he had developed. You see. So I could not counter the phantom's moves, but then I began to anticipate his cuts and thrusts and control them. When that happened, the image disappeared in a flash. This went on for 3 days. And suddenly there were no longer images, just beams and clouds of light. I did not feel like I was holding a wooden sword any longer. It seemed as if I was breathing in the entire universe. This experience lasted 2 weeks. I then felt completely renewed and had the experience of sensing the entire universe inside my belly. Or body. I realized that enlightenment attained through religious practice and enlightenment gained through Buddha training were the same. I shed tears for the blessing I had received. I saw all of the creation, humans, plants, animals, fish, insects, as being interrelated and emanating from the one source. I was full of gratitude and respect for the divine. That's when I stopped focusing on the physical techniques of Aikido. The only thing remaining was the ShoChikuBau, swordplay. And again, that's the pine, bamboo, plum. The single most important technique was misogi practice, cleansing. And again, maybe Again, we live at very ordinary levels, okay? And the senses get contaminated by our interior dialogue and a very, very, very contained I. And so at some point he had the ability to not to break out, but realize there were other sensory experiences possible. Seeing beams of light, things like that. It's feel, sense, feel. Okay? I clearly saw that all the people of the world were members of one family. As the Emperor Meiji wrote, all people of the 4 seas are brothers. Let us all join hands and work together. Okay? Now he is, relating his own experiences. Okay, in other words, for him, they were very vivid. And so we were going into sensing. And so I thought we'd do is maybe continue that with some movement. Okay? So. Okay, so we'll probably segue into the spear, staff movements, but he was talking about ShoChikuBau, sword play, okay? And the plum show, the chiku, bamboo, the pine, square, ShoChikuBau, okay? And there are sets. I mean, people tend to come, this is the kumitachi. And Osensei learned certain things from physical teachers. So, to some degree, he followed certain forms. But the ShoChikuBau is I was taught. Hikizuchi sensei, he kind of, I remember I was about to come back in 1973 at the end of the year, and he was going to visit, or so that was the plan, this area. Okay. And so, he told me, sensei wa America iku yo, America itte kara jaku ni ShoChikuBau no ken o yoshiru. So he said something like, I'm going to America, and when I go there, I'm going to teach you the ShoChikuBau. Okay? And so, now there's your basic movement with a sword. Okay? But again, the actual ShoChikuBau is, I think, at a level of what he called, you're not doing just your normal sword play. You are in the realm of sensing. Okay? Now, for example, there's kind of basic cutting motion. Okay? Now, one thing about the ShoChikuBau, again, this is my own analysis of it, okay, is that the sword is very close then to the movement of the spear. Okay, for example, you have 2 things. Somebody's coming to cut you. Boom. Okay, and you are on this end receiving the cut. Okay, now, one of the things, for example, right there, that's the cut. Right? Now, what we do oftentimes is step to the side and try to counter that cut with a cut. That and that represent one harmony. So the actual partner coming in and raising himself of the breath, we're more into matching that breath. But instead of both of us cutting the other down, boom, we move to the side, show the attacker the vulnerability that's created when they attack. Now, okay, now he's going to come in. I'm going to respond with a movement of form. If partner and I are part of the same breath, boom. Now we polarize. Partner is much more yin. My motion is very yin. But see, I can actually lose in terms of that timing and make my point. Or we match, and that's one beat. Okay? So that's what we call the triangle. Now there's another aspect, there are more. Somebody is coming in. Let me, okay. Come on, go. Go. My cat wants to go inside, so I put her in there, or she's going to walk around and meow, all right? Where on this end, there's a raise to cut. And at that particular point, boom. Now, somebody, for example, is coming in to cut, and then right on the path of attack, it's almost I can get them, but then again, their cut may also get me. So it's the same thing, boom. Okay, and right before the sword comes back, picking the antenna, boom. That's the form of the triangle. It's the form of the triangle. Okay? Sho. Okay? Chiku. Bamboo. Right? Round, circle, right? So, again, matching, we start out as one breath. When does that breath start? That's more what we call a sensing. Now there's a world of form. Okay? Well, they attack. I sidestep, get behind, and cut them. Feeling about right here. It's that motion. It gives birth to things like your basic blend. Okay, that's circle. So, okay. And again, I'm demonstrating, but you can, if you have a bokken. Joe, staff, a little longer, oftentimes you got to watch out. Bokken, you still have to watch out. Okay? But, and a lot of this is what you call a direct transmission. In other words, this is something Osensei learned. So after he studied forms of sword, and he was very gifted and could anticipate within the forms, but that experience with the phantom was very important, I think. And he had the 1935 or wherever it was, the experience with the naval captain. Might have been 1927, can't remember, where he was challenged and he faced the naval captain with a sword, without a sword. And he just moved and couldn't be touched. He was seeing or sensing the attack before. Okay, here with the sword. Boom. So, what Hikizuchi Sensei would do, he would have me grab a bokken. Believe me, I didn't know what to do at all. Right? But somehow he made me look good. Okay. And I remember the precise instant where all of a sudden, what happens is, I raise to come in. Okay, or I'm over here. I raise to come in, boom, that way. And all of a sudden, it's like, I got the feeling he didn't just step to the side and step behind me and cut me. They sort of rode some circular energy to get from here to there. So that actually is a very vivid experience. Somebody's coming in this. And so, those three forms, the triangle, circle, square, the plum, the bamboo. The last one is the pine. Okay? And the attacker comes in to cut. And moving in, boom, underneath the arms. Not cutting the arms, but precisely putting it right there. Okay? So this is right underneath the arm. So if they do cut, metaphorically speaking, these are wooden swords. So, boom. Now, for example, if we go like this, it leaves the head open. So it's very important. Okay? And this is kind of that motion. Okay? So it's okay? So you have the triangle, thrust form, cut form. You have a circle. Oh. Circle exists on the other side. Okay. And you have the square. Okay? And Hikizuchi Sensei a lot of times would do triangle. In other words, you'd be suspended here. He would take that away, he would complete the cut. You'd be moving over here as a part of the circle. Now, if you sat here, your legs are cut. So, boom. Okay, and then you'd enter with the square. Now, those are what I was taught, what Hikizuchi Sensei explained as ShoChikuBau, triangle, circle, square. Okay. And Osensei is talking about the ShoChikuBau, swordsmanship, okay? It's like boom, boom, boom. Okay? Now, one of the things you can kind of do is manufacture your own phantom. Somebody's about to attack, boom. Right at the apex of the rays, boom, you position at the wrist. Now, they still have the attacking intent, you ease up so they can complete their attack, but you're at the side. Boom. The raise again, you go to the other wrist, boom. Boom. So a lot of movement, boom, 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 boom. And we're moving triangle to circle to square in a very fluid manner, okay? So I don't necessarily visualize a phantom version of me. Boom, boom, boom. That is something that we sense. Over here to here. There's an up, there's an interval, there's a down. But here, the attacker will go, and then boom. Okay, and up, boom, down, to the side in a good position. Now, certain things, for example, if all you're doing is this, the blade can come at you, but there's a sense right there where this is penetrating, making a connection, not hurting them. Okay? So that's my experience with what Osensei called ShoChikuBau. And just raising the sword. Boom, 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 boom. You can begin to really what you're doing, you're fencing with an energy field, which is an extension of you. All right. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So the sword here, for what I see, okay, is actually taisubaki, it's like the thrusting motion. That's also the cutting motion of the sword. Boom. See right here, the tip is actually, you're behind the tip forming a triangle. That's the entering motion. Boom. That's the circular motion. Boom. Boom. The re-entry is really a square, right? And then we have movements kind of like. But for me, this becomes there's a sensing right there where like you and your partner become one breath. Over that. So you move at the same time. It's not trying to fool your partner. Where his partner comes in. Boom. Body opens. If I go a little too much to the side, I actually pull his attention or her attention in. Feeling is you're going forward and boom. Okay. So I'm not sure exactly how much can be transmitted. I'm explaining it much better than it was taught to me. Okay, so I would just, not knowing much what to do, Hikizuchi sensei would, just yell at me to boken o motte koi, get a boken, and I was supposed to attack him, and he would It was direct transmission. By the time you understand it, the understanding sometimes puts us in a different world. You know, boom, boom, boom. Oh, boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom. Oh. The ability then to move freely. Oh, boom. I had the sword in a funny position, but we can still use it in that position. Now I'm using it a little bit more like I would be using a spear or a staff. So you have to be adaptable. Okay? I don't know how much of that, you know, we kind of segued into the ShoChikuBau. Anybody with a comment or question on that? You can't practice, by the way, that way. You can.
Sensei, it's Chris. I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
When you are doing those movements that correspond to Sho, Chiku, and Bai,
Yeah.
do you have a different feeling in yourself when you're doing it, or is it really an external movement in your view?
I'm conscious of the fact that there's a form. That's the
Okay.
triangle. That's the circle. The completion of it's a square. I'm not thinking of it though. More than anything else, what I have to do is clear. If I'm thinking too much about what I'm going to do, it can, you know, what Osensei calls it contaminates the senses. If the senses get contaminated, this becomes something I need to use to win. And this is a little bit more like, boom.
In order to ride the wind of the energy, you have to first be able to feel that wind.
Or literally, the first thing you got to do to feel it is empty here. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If
Hi.
my senses are too contaminated, I'm looking at the winds, you know, so I can beat somebody.
Hi.
And that right there, all of a sudden, you know, you go back into it. Okay, now I'm gonna be a swordsman with the ability to read an opponent's energy so I can win. And that's kind of a major stumbling block. You see what I mean? In terms of what you're talking about. Now, whether or not, you know, you triangle, circle, square. Most people that I know, you know, they kind of want to go, yeah, you know, they go through 8 or 9 pretty common sense. The Osensei, actually, from what I understand, he had a dojo and he invited somebody to come in who was a sword teacher and taught something, I think it was Katori Shinto Ryu. And so, you know, he didn't participate in the classes, but he was exposed to that. And so given that, then he would work on a lot of these changes by himself, okay? And so, you know, some of the forms that people, oh, this is Osensei's this or that, I think, you know, come out of that, they're pretty close to, or a kind of a certain thing, what classical martial artists think about. A lot of Aikido weapons is kind of, you know, back, bent, dense, heavy, is that they basically are very critical of it. Now, if you watched, you know, I mean, one side you have Osensei and he's kind of illustrating something. Then the other side you have maybe his best student like that. And so, you know, there's an area where, you know, with what you perceive, we try to validate things by making it into a form, by giving it into a structure. And Hikizuchi Sensei never did that, okay? In fact, nobody in the Shingu Dojo, when we did weapons, you know, the sword was in the moment feel. Okay, now certain things, you know, you could work on, not like your basic cutting motion. Boom. But the actual sword play was an in the moment sensing. And so, when you're there, I mean, there are streams of energy. And there are streams of energy, and there are gaps and pauses in them, and you're moving that way. And so the thing that is tricky. I mean, somebody says, okay, we're going to do a four attack, 4 defense set. Okay, there's certain things you want, like you kind of want to make sure that you're covered here or there. Most time, okay. Certain things, for example, if you go here, the quickest thing to get is the wrist. So that's why right here, you're facing, see here the wrist is covered because the sword's slanted. But if you're like this, now sometimes what, one strategy is that you leave this open so you can go like that, right? Somebody says, oh, I can take the wrist, and then at that moment, boom, their wrist is exposed. And so it's a form of, the circle starts, boom, at that point, that's the square. Boom. But the difference right there is that that's like a pin. It's not like, oh yeah, I got your wrist, it's over. And that's something that you are more in the moment feel of. And so, that
Thank you.
Yeah, that part of it is very difficult. That's kind of why a lot of the stuff, is direct. So I explain a lot more than I was ever taught. For me, it was just like, okay, you're in the direct field experience of make of it what you will. And you can train in many different directions. Most people kind of want to learn forms. And, boom, 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 boom. Okay. And, there's structure that you need. But then when we get into the structure, oftentimes, the senses get contaminated with I. And, the actual sense of it is that then all you want to do is win. I want to be better. I'm going to feel sense the attack so I can win. It's like that's different than this is very, very serious. But the move where you are actually moving into a situation to kind of create harmony, motivated by what Osensei would call love, can be very serious. And it's not necessarily, the thing is that you want love to win. If I win, then somebody else loses. But if love wins, uke nage represent a harmony. Your take usu aiki. Okay, so the sword can be a very contentious thing. Okay, or conversely, the sword can be an instrument. To bring that into being. Okay. Yeah, that's a good question, though. All right. Anybody else
Thank
have
you.
Anybody else with a question or comment on that one? That by the way, yeah. Yes.
I have a question. As I'm getting in the feel of it, and the bamboo and pine and plum have different feels.
Yeah.
And with our training with dimensionality, do you find in your practicing and understanding that they're different dimensionalities or finer, each one has a different finer or more coarse dimensionality, or do they all exist in the same space-time?
Well, what I would say right there is, as you go to a finer level of yourself, then you start to get the finer dimensional sense of 1, 2, 3. You see what I mean? And as you go finer still, the construct, triangle, circle, square, are still there, but they take on a finer sense. Okay? And at that one point, what I thought that what was really revealing was the phantom image of Osensei was himself. There was a finer version of himself that showed. Initially, it was a phantom image, and Osensei was working with the sword, and he couldn't beat the image. But then after a while, it's like, you know, he sort of went to the next level himself. He began to sense what that more advanced level of himself is going to do. Therefore, he also was on that level, maybe a little ahead. And then all of a sudden, what did he say? He said the phantom vanished and he felt the whole universe in his body. Okay? So the sword play was fun and probably quite revealing. Sure, he learned a lot. But the ultimate thing was all of a sudden, you know, he had a very universal sense of him, you know, that the self got to be a bit more universal. Therefore, the universe revealed itself as being inside him. So, you know, that those are words, and the words after a while are cheap, although sometimes that's all we have. Okay? So I would say that as you go to a finer level of you, know, the triangle, boom, the circle, boom, the square, boom, start to acquire more substance through that finer level. And they exist dimensionally as well. Initially, I'm just going to be like that. But right there, boom, see that motion continues way past it. Whoa. That motion continues past it and sets up the next move. So as you start to breathe more fully, quiet and cleanse the senses more fully, and get more into the sense feel of the moment, you'll find the triangle, circle, square are also orchestrated by different energies. And as you get a little clearer, the energies get a little clearer. I mean, I could spend more time on this, but you know, I'm as lazy as the next person. But that's what I do when I pick it up. That's the energies come in, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. Oh. That's kind of a, and you know, it goes back to what I do with the spirit. There are different winds. So I don't know if that answers your question, but as you get clearer with you, go from a level of I self to a deeper level of I self, triangle, circle, square, they become clearer. Okay?
Yes,
That's the best answer I can give you right now.
yes, thank you. Very, very helpful.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else with a question or comment on that?
Hi, Sensei, this is Cliff.
Yes.
Just a quick comment that this class is dovetailing very nicely into the energy work we were doing on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's all energy. It's all energy. I mean, you know, there's martial skill, okay? And, you know, I think the way Osensei put it, you're training, so you're somewhat, you know, be nice if you develop some, right? But the Aikido itself is all about energy and, you know, finer states of energy as self goes finer. So it's about development. He says everything comes out of love anyway. And so, you know, there's an area where, you know, one of the things, unfortunately, what the I loves is winning. And of course, you know, it's kind of nice, you know, winning makes you feel good, you know, I won. And then eventually there's an area where we get trapped because no one's going to win all the time, no matter how good you are. Okay? I mean, I'm a fellow basketball. How good are the Lakers without LeBron James? Well, he's out. I think it's a lesson. Stephen Curry was out for 5 games. The Warriors lost them all. And so, yeah, you're really good. And all of a sudden, it's not about necessarily just winning. Winning is, progress to your next level. All right. And the ability to hang in there, oftentimes when maybe we're on the downside or something, and the docents kind of likes, the term, downtime. I think Osensei realized it. He says, not as good as I am. There's going to eventually be somebody better. And so at some point, for me to keep winning is a very limited thing. And so at some point, there's what is victory. Victory is something that we win over the limited I that wants to control us to get into finer levels, where a lot of what he says makes sense. Okay? The I is either very, very inspired by that, then it runs into the wall of reality. Or conversely, it's just, it's just words. Yeah, I like the words, but I want to get out there and I want to win. You see? And the tricky thing is something called spirit. It's about winning. But it's about, the victory is about spirit. You get the spirit. What is spirit? Well, you could argue spirit and love are very close, if not the same thing, from different angles. So, that part of it is, somewhat tricky. The I gets to where it plays a lot of games with itself and can justify itself. And so to actually cleanse the senses, we see ourselves a little more clearly for who we are at that level. And then we can start to, so for me, when I'm in, that particular type of training, I clear as best I can. I just clear. And let the movements sort of happen through that clear space. Now there's still me, and I say, oh yeah, that's a triangle, oh yeah, that's a circle, that's a square. But the movements like but there's a freedom. Boom, 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 boom. Over here we have a square, boom. On the other side. If a square, we step back, boom, triangle. Boom. So, that area right there, it's almost like the energies are orchestrating. Or orchestrating your motion. And therefore, there's that same energy for both uke and nage. We're kind of like one breath, so to speak. So that's kind of what I find with it. Okay. Now, you pick up a sword, and all of a sudden you start to think about samurai movies and things like that. And so you get kind of hyped up to win, like, your favorite samurai hero. So I don't know, anybody else with a comment or question on that?
I just want to make a comment on your response to my comment,
Sure.
I thought it was that was a really interesting point, that the energy guides both uke and nage, and not just nage. That's pretty cool.
Well, the universe is the universe, and I mean, to some degree, like sometimes you walk around and everybody's in a mood. Wherever you go, everybody's kind of in a chaotic state. What is called in Star Wars is a vast disturbance in the Force, right? I mean, I think it was one of the more recent ones, the last trilogy, where the heroine goes to this island. She meets an older version of Luke Skywalker. And she's talking about how, she's learning to control things and get these powers through the Force. And Luke Skywalker says, look, the Force is what binds the whole universe together. It's not about, it can be used for powers, which is kind of like the temptation of the dark side. But he said, that's not what the Force is at all. Not at all. And so, just to do, that's a great philosophical statement. And most of the world wants wealth and winning. And, we're sort of in a huge mess right now. And so, when Osensei is really talking about, misogi, it just means that, ideally it'd be nice if the whole human race kind of got out of its own way, realized it was a part of nature, and, ran economic systems, not just to make profits and make, the CEOs wealthy and then everybody else struggles. Stock market goes up. People at the bottom, they're suffering. It's a very strange world. And everybody wants to be on top and winning as opposed to. The sense of spirit is that we all are the same family. And if you're on top, you want to stay there. And so, that part of it is a major, needs a major rewrite. Okay? I don't know if that helps or whatever, but anybody with any personal...
No, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody with any personal observations as in how this might help you out in terms of, your, just in terms of anything. Because everything, is really energy. And, the movement of energy. Boom, boom, boom. The movement of energy. Movement of energy. What am I going to do? The movement. Boom, boom, boom. That's about 2 or 3 different moves right here. This to this to this to this. It's one form of this to this to this to this. This to this to this to this to this. And you're kind of moving, between the spaces. From here, there's a space to here, there's a space to here, there's a space. And so a lot of that is kind of like, it's all in seeing, instead of the forms, which I'm sure Osensei, spent his time with. But then when he's really talking about ShoChikuBau, he's really talking about something with the sword that's much, my sense, has a lot to do with this finer sensing of himself, the reality of the universe, the energies and forces that populate the universe, and the potentials as we get finer as self to bond with those forces and create harmony. That would be my sense of what he was into. And the chambara, which is kind of a term for the samurai sword with bang, 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 is really entertaining, but it gets to be a distraction. You get so much into just the chambara, kind of doing the sword play out there, bang, 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 and winning, that we kind of lose track of, what he was into. Okay? Yeah. So any motion of a sword, like for example, the blade goes up, which means it can intercept the wrist coming down there, but then it goes over, allows the actual cut to complete, because we're just showing an opening. Now, if I go here, for example, then I track that, but just from here. Boom, 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 boom. And so, I'm getting out of camera right there, but you can. One thing that I get a little bit is that, as much as flow is this way, it kind of has certain slats to it. And you can go this way, and there's a flat, and all of a sudden you switch flows. Boom, 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 boom. So, all right. There was an expression, it's not an Aikido expression so much, it's a Chinese expression, you know, the Tai Chi joining hands, right? It's called the Ta Lu. And, you know, it's more advanced, complex versions of the joint hands. And what it was told was, you know, it appears like it's a circle. But as you really start to get the Ta Lu, you know, dot, 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 there are kind of points or nodes in that circular motion. And so, you know, part of, you know, learning the ShoChikuBau is that you are, right? 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 Those of you, you know, I mean, I tend to study this stuff for no particular reason. But if I were ever to meet Stephen Curry, what I would tell him is, I said, you, what you do is almost unique. Why? Because he understands, you know, everything is motion. And when he goes like this, they don't know what to do. And I just watch him, you know, he's suddenly goes like this way, and then they don't know what to do because they're in this motion mode. And he goes into stillness, and then he changes his movement. Boom, boom, boom. Or, you know, he goes like this, and he doesn't shoot. And they go, what's he gonna do? And then he shoots. Yeah, that's why, you know, even though he's like 33 years old, which is getting old, unfortunately, for a basketball player, he understands stillness and movement. Okay, in other words, there's motion, but there are little slats of stillness that you can boom, 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 boom. And that's something that comes out of the ShoChikuBau. Okay. If we go into this, boom, there's motion, but there's stillness that creates the next motion, that links the next motion. Boom. Well, these are more complex patterns that you can't do with the sword because the sword is basically up and down, and the blade, you know, can create slants in here, but the spear, boom, 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 boom. And so, you know, in that sense, you know, this motion, boom, boom, can be that, or it can be that motion, or it can be that motion. And that same motion, dimensionally, has different still points in it. So, you know, I mean, you know, just, you know, all this motion going, and Curry goes like this. And then when they're fixed, he uses the still point. Because they're expecting him to move, and he goes like this, and they lose their center, and then boom, boom, he's doing something. I was going, gosh, he's kind of like an Osensei in the NBA, you know, I study his movement, okay? And so he kind of understands these rhythms and these, you know, motion, stillness, substance, emptiness. He understands that to some level. And, you know, it's not to say other players don't do that, but, you know, this year, since the team is awful, you know, he's about the only bright spot on it. He's supposed to do more. He hasn't got a couple other all-stars to pass on the ball and everything. And so we're seeing a bunch of stuff. I mean, I'm watching going, wow. Wow. See, it's not saying a lot of times, you know, I'm going to move off the line. No, he's kind of here, and then all of a sudden, boom. If you understand stillness, you can move out of that stillness. You know, or right about here, boom, all of a sudden, next one. So boom. We move out of that stillness. Boom, 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 boom. And that's more what I call a sensing. I'm sensing the stillness. Okay. Now, you know, that's it's a little theoretical. It's hard to kind of do much with it but you don't have a training partner. So unfortunately, we'll have to wait until things kind of open up a little bit more. Let's see. Yeah, we are right about there. So let's kind of, those of you who came in a little late, we're going to go back to the first part of what we covered. Okay. And so it goes back to here. During the war, the fighting became more and more fierce. And I saw that defeat was inevitable. The gods told me the world is in terrible trouble. One after the other, young men are being sent to be slaughtered. This dreadful state of affairs has come about because of the inability of nations to rid themselves of hate and contention. What do you do if you hate someone? You want to win, don't you? Last 4 years of the prior administration was one great lesson, not to give in to our hate and judgment. I didn't do very well, to be honest with you. Okay, all right. It is up to you to give your all in order to stop the war. Okay, so I doubt he heard that as words. I think he felt it here, but he felt it from that sensing space. Okay. This was the inspiration I had, and I hoped that I would be able to accomplish such a great task. I had the intuition that Hiroshima would soon be destroyed and the war would end. But given the circumstances, I had to keep my mission hidden. In other words, what was he going to do right in the middle of a war, going out there trying to stop the war? But he could sense Hiroshima, what happened, with the bombing and the war ending. In fact, according to Nado Sensei, Sensei told him he could feel the, the carnage. He could feel, especially the children burning. Sometimes we think, wow, it'd be nice to kind of have that sort of those abilities. But then again, it's not. It comes with a certain responsibility. Not everybody, can handle that. What I could do was establish a Takemusu Aiki dojo dedicated to peace and acting as a beacon to the world. So yeah, he built an Aiki shrine and had a dojo. So for a while, it was an outdoor dojo in Iwama, okay? I kept my thoughts to myself, devoting myself to building the dojo, trusting that such an act would help bring an end to the war. And sure enough, the war did end. In other words, the whole thing was a battle. So he picked, within that larger task of end the war, he picked a battle he could win that would support that larger thing, right? Aikido in 1948, which was my birth year, was, during the occupation of Japan. It was the very first martial art, that was allowed to open. All of the other more traditional arts were seen as part of the war effort. But, the charter that the Aikikai put out was really around, to some degree at least, at that time, Osensei's vision. And therefore, it was okay. This is not about winning or about war. This is about creating peace and harmony Okay. Okay, not long. Okay, now then he goes into the experience of the phantom swordsman, the phantom image of himself. But you see, part of it, I would say they're connected because, he didn't just block it out. He listened to the inner voices. There were outer voices too, but, I think you sense them here. If you don't sense them here, they don't make any sense. Okay. And so that's all part of the process. And then all of a sudden, he went to a whole different level of himself. So I was talking to Audrey about, the triangle, circle, square. If you're sensing a finer of them, that means that it's a finer level of you. And if you look at what Osensei was finding, was initially that phantom image was somewhat contentious. It was a challenge, but it was him. And as he, instead of, he had to let go of himself a lot, and all of a sudden, he was at a different level. So, when he's talking about triangle, circle, square, it doesn't mean the ultimate sword system. It just means that, the triangle, the circle, and the square represent different aspects of the one, maybe. Okay? Each of them, as Hikizuchi Sensei kind of named them. The triangle. Osensei says most stable posture, but it's the most stable posture in motion. Triangle. And the triangle supposedly represents Zettai Fuhai na Taisei, the posture of invincibility. But a lot of that is, why is it invincible? Because it doesn't contend with anything. Not, okay, you attack, I'm Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you are a vampire. It's not like that. The circle. Maru wa chushin ga nai. The circle has no center. Well, one of the major archetypes is center circle. But the center of the bamboo is empty space. And this t-shirt, was, I think, off of an Osensei quote that was, translated by Saotome Sensei. The circle, that emptiness of a circle contains all the energy of the universe. So we tend to think the universe is all this vast, vast energy. It's big. But then there's emptiness that is also there. Any little portion of it contains the same amount of energy. If you divide infinity by 2, what do you get? You get infinity. What if you divide infinity by 3,000 or 3 million? What do you get? So the circle has no center, but it's emptiness, it's freedom. And then what the freedom does, it unlocks the capacity to love. And then the square, the pine, omote uranai. Well, it's radially symmetrical, has no front or back. Now, there's also the image of the circle as applied control. I mean, the square is applied control, which I think is kind of more of a matter dimension. There's physical training, boom. But the no front or back, well, it's transparent. I think the circle, I mean, the square represents self. So each of them, had kind of like a koan type statement associated with it. Okay. And that was, 1973, where Ikizuchi Sensei would give these lectures, and then Mary Heine Sensei would, I'd ask her questions and she would write them out. He kind of would have a little bit of vocabulary and everything like that. None of this stuff made a lot of sense then. But anyway, anybody with a question? Because that's what we started the class out with. Okay. And sometimes things are hard to talk about because, when you talk about sensing, see, there's that thing where we're going to put in a word, but you might not have a word for what you're sensing. And the trick, a little bit, is you develop word. But that word is not out there. And so that word, or whatever it is, becomes, my very, very primitive understanding of it is, it becomes kototama. Word here, there's a pulsing. Want to go a little finer with it. It's like a heartbeat. Go a little finer with it. Within that pulse, there's breath. And so things like that, you can develop. It's a kind of a sense, you're developing the. Now here, for example, the energies kind of rise, or they're, and all of a sudden, they go out, they come back, and they get dense. And then they also rise. So you begin to see patterns of energy. Not, okay, I read this in a book. Okay, I'll try it. You sort of write your own manual. Feel sense here. Things are very calm, peaceful. But then, boom, there's a thunderclap. That's right around the corner from it, always there. And creation is a combination of and that, and boom. Like this is doing an Osensei pose here. This is what you see when you go outside Tanabe train station. You see this massive statue of him. If you go to the ocean, there's another one of these. It says birthplace, and he's pretty famous there. Anybody with a question or statement? So, we kind of went into the sensing of it. This, you can practice. Okay, you can practice. Exactly how that develops. As you develop, the vocabulary comes here. You may get an image, an image of a fountain. Pretty, it's like thinking of a fountain, isn't it?
Sensei, it seems to me that the
Yeah.
ability to sense the energy and to move with it
Yeah.
is something that it's tricky because our mind tends to want to see things that aren't there, or maybe our perception is tricky in that way. Would you agree, or do you think that the physical practice of Aikido Waza is more to help us refine our ability to feel that than it is to learn forms per se, or how to do this technique or that technique?
Probably. No, it just depends on the emphasis. I mean, if you get a little too vague, for example, you know, there's a phantom world or something like that. The actual, because there's this, but then there's also this. So how much, you know, but see, when I'm here and all I see is, because my senses are kind of locked into.
Yeah. But on the other hand, when you get hit in the face, that's a pretty tangible way to represent that maybe you weren't feeling the way the energy was really going as well as you thought you were.
Yeah, or conversely, you know, I mean, somebody hits you in the face. Is they're bad too? You can go like, see, you can go like that and say, look, you know, there's an opening here, which you might want to pay attention to. Okay. And you know, it's not like, well, they're wide open, so I'm gonna.
Right.
Yeah, you know, so you know, yeah, there was a kid that was training at the Shingu school, because there used to be a type of there was an accounting school club that met for formal classes about twice a week. But the days there weren't classes Monday through Saturday, there were they were, you know, they would get together, and the senior person would teach, right? You know, but it was chaos. They goofed around. So after my second stay, you know, I had a little bit more clout in the dojo. So I would show up there because I was senior, right? So I take the class and everything like that. And there's this one kid, he wasn't bad. It's just he got excited. And, you know, and when you're excited, you know, you're hurting people. And so, you know, so he would, you know, he would sort of try to do a move, and boom, I kind of not hit him, but I go, oh, you know, I just let him know that, you know, when he's in this state, boom, 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 right? And so anyway, I come back from, you know, I mean, I leave for the States because teaching position opens up at UC Santa Cruz because Robert Frazier is leaving to found his own graduate school in transpersonal psychology. So, you know, I come back, and so, you know, one of my friends says, this kid, you know, walks in the dojo and looks around and says, "Where's Jack?" And somebody says, "Oh, he went back to America." And I'm like, "Good." You know, I never hit him, but it was kind of like he was so high and nervous. He was dangerous. You know what I mean? And so, you know, I go, "Mom, just bring him down to earth." And, you know, he didn't quite know what to do with it. You know. And if I just sort of, yeah, I could have blasted him, but that would say more about me than him. He wasn't inherently bad. He was just so high and tense. He hurt people. And I just tried to get him, but at least he was calming down a bit. You know, it's like an acupuncture needle, overactive kidney, overactive this, boom. And for whatever reason, you know, he equated me to Bruce Lee. So I said, well, you know, oh, Jakwa Bruce Lee Mitai. Well, you know, not quite, but, you know, that was his perception, you know. And you know, it was funny. It was like, yeah, you went back to America. Great. But, you know, if somebody hits you in the face, yeah, I mean, you know, it's probably our bad, but it also says something about them.
Yeah.
And it's not all good. You see?
Certainly helping to recognize each other's openings encourages us maybe to find a way to shift to a new energetic plane.
Yeah, I mean, Tojima Sensei, you say you train together where we mutually teach each other to close our openings and work towards a more harmonious sense of each other and what we're doing. That's the way Tojima Sensei put it. And boom, he used to like to put the atemi in. Right? Yeah, but he didn't. I mean, I really wouldn't want to be hit by him. But he had control. Now, some of the younger people, they kind of they would kind of do that. But that's more of a statement on them. Yeah, okay, you do that. Yeah, okay. And so you just had to realize it's like, they're kind of a level down. They're in that. I got to hit you and show you I'm better than you right now. And they were. So, it's more of a statement on them. So that's the thing, is that a lot of times we tend to lose. But, there's an area where if you have to win, it's a weakness. You see what I mean? Because you can't handle defeat. Everybody loses. I mean, the way Osensei put it is like, people think I've never lost. He says, no, I've lost, countless times. In other words, he says, mainly it's when my attention wasn't where we're supposed to be. And maybe I was good enough to appear to have won, but I knew inside that I had lost. Okay. Because apparently one time he was teaching police, and he was demonstrating, and somebody challenged him, went at him right in the middle of a demonstration. And he was surprised. And he kind of threw the guy, or did a technique, and hurt the guy. And then he said, in retrospect, he overreacted, and he began to realize that he needed to develop the ability not to feel defensive. So, he took it as a learning experience. He says, I lost. I was less than who I was supposed to be. So given that, that's kind of the world of the eye. So if somebody punches you and hits you in the face, that's a lot about them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. So, the whole thing is, there's a martial sense to it. I mean, part of the martial sense is that, if we get a little too mentally fine with things, we drift off. And then when that happens, things start to deteriorate. But if we get too locked into this and winning with our senses clogged, the eye kind of very undeveloped. And I mean, a lot of really successful people, if they don't know how to lose, they're in trouble. Because we all are going to lose. I mean, the whole thing with the pandemic and the school shutting down, it's massive defeat. I mean, yeah. I mean, there are people I haven't seen in well over a year, where'd they go? I mean, but I talk to other Aikido teachers, they say the same thing, and it's not just the loss of income or loss of a training space or whatever it is, but we blend. Okay. So, anybody else with anything to add or to share?
Yes, Sensei,
Yeah.
I'm afraid I have some broken Japanese to
Sure.
sum up my reflection. Watashi
Sure.
wa kami ni naru. And I'm probably messing up the particle there, and I may be messing up the verb there.
No, actually, watashi wa kami ni naru, which means I become kami.
Which I also recently got reminded is also how you say paper, or one of the words for paper too. There's kami, and there's another way that.
Well, if you want to become a piece of paper, you can. That's part of the Japanese language.
Right.
Kami, right? There was this one guy at the Shingu school who was trained in Tokyo. He was actually quite strong, but he had a really bad rep, and so his name was Kami. And Hikizuchi Sensei kind of, one time, I'm in the office and his name comes up, and he was on the, he was on everybody's list. Not because his Aikido wasn't good. It was just, it was him. And so Hikizuchi Sensei says, "Ano hito wa kami-sama de wa nai, shirigama da." And so that translates as, that guy is not kami, as in spirit or deity, is toilet paper. So, there's a point where Hikizuchi Sensei kind of like to do that, plays on words and everything like that. Kami ni naru, I don't know that, there's a whole kami ni kawatte kuru. There's a lot of, you change into kami. I would say a little bit more like, our true essence, as we go back more towards an original, is kami. And so sometimes, the way that Bruce Lee put it, which I thought was good, he says, becoming is a denial of being. I need to become. So within that, we are already something. It's just that there's a separation from our own consciousness from that level of who we truly are. Therefore, we work in increments. And Osensei said, win over yourself. Okay? And sometimes we're at a point where we're winning and we're being pretty good, and then all of a sudden everything just, whoa, what's going on here? Well, it's a chance to win over yourself. And so as we do that, as we win over ourselves, there's a clarity, hopefully. And we get back to some version. Because if everybody realized we all came out of one source, I thought what was interesting was that in a recent basketball game, Stephen Curry wore some sneakers with Bruce Lee's image on them. And he quoted Lee, "Under heaven, one family." And this is in response to a lot of the violence that's come up against Asian Americans. And right now, there's there's all this stuff about racial this, racial that, whether it's whatever. It's just a point where I just thought, it would have been kind of neat if he had put Osensei's image on that sneaker. And what he did is he auctioned the sneaker off, which somebody's going to buy because it was Stephen Curry's sneaker. And then he's going to donate that money. And then he also, to be honest with you, you think about what you're going to do, who you're going to promote. Well, he worked through the Bruce Lee Foundation because Bruce Lee is a good symbol. But it's kind of too bad that he didn't contact Hombu Dojo and talk to Doshu and say, "I just want to put your grandfather." You see what I mean? That in that way, it's kind of too bad that, because the message of it, I think Osensei, as much as I really like Bruce Lee, and Lee is a lot easier to read than Osensei is. But I think it would have been really cool if he had chosen Osensei as that image. And, there's a lot of similarity, between Lee and Curry. Lee was not a big guy, but he kind of understood, boom, he understood, he understood power through speed. Yeah. And he was a revolutionary. And Curry is kind of the same way. Basketball establishment, they still don't appreciate him because, you have to be big, you have to be super athletic, you have to. And he is much more athletic than people give him credit for. But he redefined space and time in Aikido, changed the whole game. So that's
Sensei, do you have time for a slightly off-topic question related to spear?
Sure.
So since I have been shifting my use of the staff towards more of a spear-oriented approach, where there's a long end that has a pointy tip at the end.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've started noticing is, because the center of gravity is different with the spear, one end is longer than the other, noticing that I have to actually connect to the way it moves with my own center differently in order to manage that different center of gravity.
Yeah.
And I remember something that you said early on after I started coming back to your noon classes here on Zoom. You said something like the use of the spear builds a feeling of how energy moves.
Yeah.
Is that like the momentum that's different when the center of gravity is further out? Is that part of what you were talking about? Or am I seeing something completely separate and different?
Well, okay, I think there are several levels of that answer. One is when you have a spear, you have a pointed cutting side and you have a wooden side. And so that's a pretty stark yin to yang, okay? And
Okay.
you have to be conscious of where the spear point is. So
Right.
what I do is I kind of hold, and make the spear end the long end, because it's easier for me to keep track of. When you're doing all this stuff, you can't keep track of it unless maybe Osensei could. All right, but
you can feel it.
Yeah, yeah, and so what I also get there is why don't we move this here and. Okay, one thing that I find is that people's sense of taisabaki, entering, turning, entering, turning, is very much like the sword, okay? Taisabaki changes. Like, for example, here, I'm going to go up to a wall and there's a crack in it, but I can't get through. But I can squeeze through by turning my body. And the crack gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And after a while, it starts to kind of circulate. That's why I'm saying a little bit, that motion, there are spaces involved. Right here, boom. Now, you see my body sets. But when I'm squeezing through that crack,
It's different.
I'm off the line and I'm not thinking so much sidestep. Okay? And the other thing that happens when I do that is that the motion of the body triangulating, boom, is where you generate the power.
Hi.
And so, yeah, with it, that's pretty much it for me. Okay, now some of these movements, for example, the center circle fire water changes. Movements like this. If I'm thinking about the staff, that becomes a blocking motion. But I'm turning this way and you have a multitude of attackers. And that's sharp. Or this is sharp. They'd be much less apt to just charge you. And then right about here, then we slip and we're outside. Boom. All right. So it's almost like, see, you're moving here, and the crack kind of rotates, and then it kind of opens up here. So my sense of the taisabaki, I'm squeezing through that crack. Now it widens out. I'm going to squeeze through another crack. Now I'm feeling the crack circularize. I'm going through it with my back. And so the body changes, for me, are very different. And when I do the sword or I do the staff work, that motion, there's a difference between that or that and that. See, this one, there are slats. Now, every slat, boom, is a potential change. Okay, the slats are kind of like the spaces. Okay, we tend to think, okay, that motion. I'm going to grab the rest of them. Now, for example, here somebody's going to come at you, but you can adapt when you have the slats. I don't know. I mean, that's, you talk about, your own world. That's my world, my energetic world. And that's stuff that I picked up when I started looking at the whole thing, staff work, as spirit.
Thank you. That is extremely helpful.
Yeah, well, and those are my discoveries. You hang in there, you write your own scroll. You see what I mean?
Yes.
If what I said helps you, that's what it's supposed to do, but you're going to see it differently, ideally. All right?
Thank you.
What, yeah, I mean, if you really, I didn't make any friends with this, but when the warriors started to get really good, they're not there anymore, but, that's just the way of it, whatever goes this way comes down. But I would watch Curry, and I told Nadosa, and said, he's doing what we're supposed to be doing better than we are. That did not go over well, let me tell you. But his ability, for example, I'm going to go this way, but boom, boom, make an adjustment. He goes this way, somebody cuts him off, he can go this way and go this way. Because he understands that in his motion. See, that's motion, but there are slats of stillness there. And when you understand that, you can go that way, or you can go that way, or you can go that way. And so Osensei says, the circle, there are patterns to that fluidity of freedom. And I think, one of the reasons, he did that is he investigated the spear quite thoroughly. And, the standard Aikikai model, which is fine, is the currency of the realm. If I really want to find out, how to do a technique, and so everybody listens, this is, I check what Doshu does. And he does it beautifully. But, the ability to move more like his grandfather, that's another thing. And
they say he could move through a crowd like no one else.
Yeah, and I understand why, because all of that was his journey. That was his journey. And because of that, he hints at certain things, like, you put the spear point out there, all of a sudden, a lot of that's just clogging your senses starts to part. And there's kind of a clarity. You clean the senses. And, you know, the other thing is, you know, this looks like the center, but really what happens, a circle forms around it. Center, circle.
Ah.
And it's kind of tied to your breath. So, like, you know, for example, Tai Chi. Slow, easy motion, yes. But there are these little slats, boom, boom. These little pockets of stillness. And then when you start to breathe properly, it's almost like those, you know, those slats, they sustain you. Your body starts to kind of have more of a floating, free sense, not a heavy sense. Okay, so, you know, the actual, a lot of the stuff, you know, you've got to find your own vocabulary for. But, you know, if that's all I do, then, you know, I'm following a pattern. I'd probably be much more popular if I go, oh, yeah, see, this is the way it's done. But, you know, no, it's about self-discovery. Right? Right?
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the great Chet, you know, musician Chet Baker. So, yeah, I learned the song. I got to learn another one. I suppose I'm going to keep playing the song, and I'm going to. So, you know, the thing is, and you know, you have a song like his was My Funny Valentine. Okay, I played it that way. What's it today? What's it today? So yeah, it's the same chord structure and the same notes, but you can make the notes longer, shorter. And Baker has the same thing Curry does. Da 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 da. His use of spacing, silence is very unique. That's not something where if you listen to Miles Davis, you know, is incredible skill the way he plays, but he doesn't have that ability to sound stillness. Sound, stillness. Stillness. Baker could make a little note, an eternity, or a long sound like that. And so, you know, Miles Davis is a little bit more like another basketball player, Kyrie Irving, who's a lot of fun to watch. But Chet Baker is a lot more like Stephen Curry. I mean, you could argue who's a better trumpet player, it'd be Miles Davis. But Baker understands certain algorithms that I like. So I'm going to do a movement. I'm going to stand up. No, the standing motion is a flow. Instead of standing up in that flow, you know, there are little pockets of stillness. You can boom. And then when you do that, you know, you're doing, you know, that's all sensing. That might not work for you. You may have to find your own algorithms, but that's a lot of what training is. We're all different. That's nice. You know, and you know, so many teachers like, okay, now these are the rules and you're going to follow them because I found them. So yeah. I remember one time, you know, I was talking to, you know, Baker's good friend, Art Frank, and I'm nothing, really. I mean, I like to play because, you know, I'd like to explore the algorithms. And, you know, and he was talking about trumpet players and, you know, I'm not really much. But he says, you know, the guy that sounds, you know, one of the closest guys to sounding like him is actually you. I said, really? And he said, but if I told anybody that, they think I was nuts. And I said, yes, they would, Art. You know, just the ability to just, you know, sound, rhythm, each of those notes has a stillness in it. And a long tone has lots of activity in it. Okay, so when you start to do that, you know, you're kind of, and I don't know exactly, you phase space something there, but you acupuncture needle it from different angles and get kind of a, but each of those needles, boom, 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 is another dimension. And so, you know, that's where I like to play, you know, which you know, to some degree, I can be confusing, you know. But, you know, Hikizuchi sensei, you know, it's like, he just said, okay, I'm going to open the gateway for you, stand in it. I said, well, where's the lesson? He said, that's it. And so, you know, I try to teach that. Okay, all right. Anyway, I got to get going to pick up some stuff. So thank you all for tuning in today. Okay. Let me
Thank you, Seth.
take care.